I shouldn't have taken the shortcut. The path through Blackwood was a thin, overgrown ribbon that disappeared beneath a canopy of ancient pines, their needles whispering like dry paper. I'd heard the stories, hikers' jokes about the watchman of the woods, but I brushed them off as campfire folklore. All I needed was a quiet place to think, a few miles away from the grind of the city, and the forest answered with its oppressive silence. I trudged onward, the only sounds my boots crushing pine needles and the occasional snap of a twig under a squirrel's weight. After 2 hours, the trees began to thin, revealing a small clearing where a rusted metal fire ring sat amidst a circle of damp logs. Someone had been here recently. The ash was still warm, the scent of charred pine lingering in the air. I set down my pack, unrolled my sleeping bag, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling gnawing at the back of my throat. When I turned to look around, I saw a half-collapsed tent on the far side of the clearing, its canvas torn open like a gaping mouth. Inside, a discarded backpack lay open, its contents spilled. A water bottle, a battered notebook, a pair of children's sneakers. My heart thudded. Who had left this place? And why was the tent torn as if something had forced its way out? I tried to focus on setting up my own camp, but the sensation of being watched grew more acute. The forest seemed to hold its breath. I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. Just a branch swaying, I told myself. Yet when I glanced back, the fire ring's embers had dimmed unexpectedly, as though a gust had snuffed them out. I reached for a match, but the matchbox was gone, replaced by a single blood-stained handkerchief. A low rustle rose from the underbrush, rhythmic and deliberate. I froze, listening. Something, or someone, was circling the clearing, stepping carefully over roots, crushing fallen leaves with a soft, almost reverent tread. The sound stopped just short of my campsite, then resumed, moving clockwise, then counterclockwise, as if testing the perimeter. My rational mind searched for explanations. A hunter? A lost traveler? A group of teenagers? But none of them would leave such a grotesque trail. The handkerchief, the torn tent, the spattered ash. There was an intention behind each detail, a message. I forced myself to stand, grabbed my flashlight, and shone its weak beam into the darkness beyond the fire ring. The beam caught a pair of amber eyes reflected in a puddle a few meters away. Not animal, those were too low, too erratic. Human eyes, wide and unblinking, fixed on me. My breath hitched. I blinked, and the eyes vanished. A cold wind rose, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. I could feel the weight of someone's stare through the trees, invisible yet palpable, as if the woods themselves were holding a secret, waiting for me to uncover it. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My fingers trembled as I reached for my knife. "Hey!" I called, my voice cracking. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Then a muffled chuckle, low and guttural, rolled through the pines. It wasn't a laugh I'd ever heard from a man. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate the very sap of the trees, as if the forest itself were mocking me. I turned and sprinted toward the edge of the clearing, ignoring the throbbing pain in my ankle from a hidden root. The underbrush thrashed against my legs, as if something unseen was trying to hold me back. I could hear footsteps, bare, swift, and relentless, coming from all directions, a disorienting chorus that made my mind spin. When I finally burst out of the woods onto the narrow logging road, the sun was a blood-red smear on the horizon, the sky bruised with storm clouds. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until the lights of the nearest town glimmered in the distance, a promise of safety that felt fragile and false. Later, after I'd reported the incident to the rangers, they searched the clearing. They found the tent, the notebook, filled with frantic scribbles about, "They're watching. They won't let us leave." And the handkerchief, still stained with fresh blood. No footprints, no bodies, no sign of any human presence beyond the wreckage. The forest has its own way of keeping secrets. And sometimes, the true horror isn't the thing that stalks you. It's the knowledge that you're being watched by eyes that never tire, by a presence that knows every path you take and will wait, patient as the trees, for the next fool who thinks the woods are just a place to escape. Story 2. The crunch of twigs under my boots sounded like a warning, not a rhythm, as I wove deeper into the pines. The sun had slipped behind a veil of fog, and the forest closed in, swallowing the trail I'd followed for 3 days. I was supposed to be alone, just me, a battered rucksack, and the promise of a summit that never seemed to materialize. I stopped, breath fogging in the cold air, and listened. Somewhere beyond the thicket, a low rustle rose and fell like a breath held too long. I turned, half expecting a deer, but the trees were empty. Yet the feeling persisted. Eyes, unblinking, tracking my every step. The path narrowed, the canopy choking out the last weak light. I could see my own shadow stretching ahead of me, a dark twin that seemed to lag, as if unwilling to keep up. I forced myself onward, the feeling of being watched tightening like a rope around my spine. A sudden blaze of orange flared ahead. An abandoned campsite, half-collapsed tents flapping like dying moths. The fire pit still smoldered, ash curling into the night. Someone had been there recently. I crouched, the scent of burnt pine and cheap gasoline prickling my nostrils. A battered metal can lay overturned, its contents spilling dark, viscous liquid onto the ground. Blood? No, it was motor oil, slick and black, glistening in the fading light. A broken flashlight lay beside a torn sleeping bag, its lens shattered, casting a fractured beam across the empty clearing. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. Someone had been here, and they'd left in a hurry. Or had they been waiting? I turned to leave, but the path behind me was gone, replaced by a wall of bristling underbrush, as if the forest itself had reshaped. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. The rustle I'd heard earlier surged louder, now unmistakably human. A slow, deliberate shuffle of feet on pine needles, always just out of sight. I ran, branches clawing at my sleeves, the forest a maze of dead ends. Every turn revealed another campsite, each more grotesque than the last. A rusted skillet filled with raw meat, a child's toy. An overturned doll with a cracked porcelain face staring up at me, its glassy eyes reflecting nothing. The last one, a tarp stretched over a mound of earth, smelled of rot and something metallic. I knelt, heart thudding, and uncovered a shallow grave. A handwritten note lay atop the soil, the ink smeared by rain. Don't look back. The crunch behind me stopped. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Then, a low, guttural laugh whispered through the trees, human, cruel, and utterly devoid of any supernatural echo. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but I knew the timbre, the same tone that had haunted the radio transmissions of the missing hikers who vanished 2 weeks earlier. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, draped in a dark coat, its face obscured by a knitted cap. He lifted a hand, and the flashlight I'd seen earlier flickered to life, casting a jaundiced glow over his grin, a smile that revealed a missing tooth. "You're far from the trail," he said, each word a blade. "I thought you'd get lost anyway." I backed away, stumbling over the fresh grave, the earth slick with oil and blood. The forest seemed to close in, branches reaching like fingers. I could feel his eyes, unblinking, piercing the darkness, counting my breaths. In that moment, the true horror of the woods revealed itself. Not spirits or monsters, but the patient, relentless gaze of a man who made the forest his hunting ground. And as his hand tightened around the cold metal of a hunting knife, I realized the only thing more terrifying than being watched was being chosen.